Hari Om. In today's lesson, we will be um, carrying on or continuing in chapter 14 from verse number 15. In this chapter, the Lord has explained to us about the nature of the three gunas, the sattvic, the rajasic, and the tamasic. All the three gunas are very important and they exist in everything in creation. And the thing we have to understand is that we must although our personality is conditioned by the predominant guna, yet the Lord says all three gunas bind us to this existence. So liberation is how to cut the three ropes of these gunas and attain moksha. So now we will proceed to understand in the last verse of 14, the Lord has explained that upon death, what happens to a sattvic person, the one who has a sattvic personality? The Lord said in verse 14 of chapter 14, He said, such a person will go to the places of higher merit, which means he goes up to Swarga Loka. And what happens after he completes his term in Swarga Loka? It is mentioned in chapter 9 that a person, when he exhausts all his punyam in Swarga Loka, in the heavens, he or she comes back again to earth. Because there are many other karmas which you still have to exhaust. So, death, when a person is predominant sattvic and the person dies, he goes to Swarga Loka, then he comes back to earth. What about now in verse number 15? The Lord will tell us about what happens to a person who dies, who is predominant rajasic. So the Lord says here, pralayam, upon the pralayam or the death of the gross body. Now remember, we have three bodies, gross, the subtle, and the causal. So the gross body does not travel. It is the subtle and the causal body that travels. This will be explained more in detail in chapter 15. So the Lord says, pralayam, upon the death of the gross body, the subtle body and the causal body together with the jiva, who is a rajasi, who is predominantly rajasic at the time of death, what happens? Jayate, he is born, gatva, and attains Manusha Loka. Manusha Loka, because it is only possible in this Manusha Loka, which is called the Bhuloka, because only in Bhuloka it is possible for us to be, for actions that we do, will acquire punyam and papam. Now we must understand that when we go to Swarga Loka, whatever new actions, supposing we do good actions, we don't get extra punyam. We do bad actions, we don't get extra papam. We only go there to exhaust the karmas we're supposed to exhaust. The same thing applies to the lower lokas, the hell lokas, the naraka lokas. So it is said that the above earth, above Bhuloka, we have Bhuva, Swaha, Maha, Jana, Tapas, Satya. There are 6 Swarga Lokas. And below earth, there are 7 Naraka Lokas. So even when you go to Naraka Lokas, you only suffer the papam. You can do some more bad there. If you do some more bad things there is no additional papam. Even if you do good things in Naraka Loka, you don't get any additional punyam. It is only in Bhuloka, whatever actions you do will result in punyam or papam. So the Lord says a rajasic person is jayate, is born, katva, and attains loka, which is karma sangishu. Karma sangishu means which is attached to activity, where there is action. So the rajasic person who is prone to endless activity, he is given an appropriate janma, appropriate birth, appropriate environment So he can carry on with his all types of actions, and he accumulates punyam and papam. Now, uh, so all lokas except this earth loka is the only loka where you can, any action you do will attain punyam or papam. So Lord says, in the similar way, what about the tamasic? So sattvic person goes to Swarga lokas, rajasic person gets born back again in this bhuloka. What about the tamasic person? He says in this verse number 15, Tatha, in the similar way, okay, just like what happens to the rajasic person, he says, Pralinas, when one dies, tamasi, when the tamasic gunas are predominant, such a person jayate takes birth. Where? In Muda Yonishu. Muda Yonishu means wombs of deluded species. So in the birth of lower forms of life like animal, insect, bird, reptile. So the reason here is that the person has got to, the person in the lower form of life is deprived from the intellect. He or she does not need to use the discrimination. So just like when animals kill for food, for food or to protect themselves, they don't accumulate any new papam. So even if a cow, as a cow, gives us milk, and we use the milk for abhishekam, the cow does not get punyam. The human being who does abhishekam gets the punyam. So that lower life forms of animal, insects, etc., they don't get any punyam or papam because they are what we call devoid of any intellect. They do not know right from wrong. So in very extreme cases, of course, a tamasic person can also take birth as an asura in the Naraka lokas. So what happens when a tamasic person dies and takes birth in the lower form? So slowly, as he or she exhausts his papams, he will slowly rise to a higher and higher form and come back again to the Manusha Janma of human form. And therefore, since only in Manusha Janma, in human form, can one attain liberation, Adi Shankaracharya in Viveka Chudamani writes that there are three most difficult things to attain in life. What are the three things? One is if you attain a human form. It is one of the biggest blessings to attain the human form. Because from the human form, we can attain liberation, not from animal form. Not even if we are Deva in the Swarga Loka, we still come back to earth. Second is the company of a guru. If you are blessed with the guru, that is the second best thing that can happen to you. And third is what Shankara calls mumukshatvam, which means a desire for liberation. So you can be born as a human, you can have a guru, but if there's no desire for liberation, it is all wasted. But if you have all these three conditions, born in human form, you have a guru, and you have a desire for liberation, then these are the three very perfect combinations that Shankara says you should not waste this opportunity for liberation. So also Shankara advises human beings, do not waste your Manusha Janma and end up living like an animal. So so this is what Shankara mentions in the Viveka Chudamani. Now, so the Lord has told us the destination upon death for a sattvic person, a rajasic person, and a tamasic person. Now, in verse 16 and 17, the Lord will explain what we call the consequences of each guna while a person is living. So, a sattvic predominant person, what is the consequence while living? Earlier, he explained upon death. Now, he's going to talk about while living. So, the Lord says in verse number 16, he says, Ahu. Ahu means they say. Who says? When he says they say, he is referring to the great sages who have mentioned it in the scriptures. So it is mentioned in the scriptures also. What is it mentioned? Phalam. Phalam means the result or the fruit of what we call is Sukritasya, is result is peace of mind. So Sukritasya means good. Uh, Good means here peace of mind, what we call attraction to knowledge, interest in knowledge, thirst for knowledge, pure thoughts. So what is the result? He says Sukritasya is good for what? Karmana Satvikam. Karmana means actions which are Satvikam. So the more and more good actions we do, we strengthen our Sattvic gunas. When we strengthen our Sattvic gunas, the result is peace of mind, tranquility of mind. There arises a thirst for knowledge. There arises a thirst for liberation. So all these good, clean, pure thoughts arise from us. So even a Sattvic person has Rajasic and Tamasic gunas, but because he's predominant Sattvic, his Rajas part, the active part, will be guided by Sattva. The active part will be guided by right thoughts, right desires. So, Sukritasya, the result or the phalam of the fruit of Sattva, of having predominant Sattvic gunas, is that it is karmana, the actions are Sattvic. The result of Sattvic actions is that there is peace of mind, there is contentment, there is a thirst for knowledge. So our present, what this tells us, our present actions have the capacity to change the qualities of gunas. Just because we have predominant Rajasic, it does not mean that we cannot change to Sattvic. Okay? Because the human being is gifted an intellect to make a change in their life. So he says, the nature of Sattvic gunas is nirmalam. It is pure, meaning it is not tainted with Rajas or Tamas. So the more and more Sattvic actions you do, reading the scriptures, chanting your mantras, going for spiritual talks, going to temples, doing your prayers, all this will purify your mind, will bring about peace and tranquility in your mind also. And of course, it will suppress the Rajasic and Tamasic gunas. So the Lord carries on to say, he uses the word in this verse 15, two meaning when he wants to differentiate the description of other things away from Sattvic. So different from the result of Sattvic gunas, the Lord says, Rajasa, when a person is predominant Rajasic, phalam, the result is dukkham, phalam dukkham, sorrow. Now, when we say sorrow, it doesn't mean that the Rajasic person is crying and unhappy all the time. Because a Rajasic person may have a lot of power, a lot of position, a lot of fame, a lot of material wealth, and will be very successful materially. But why is the end result sorrow? Because a Rajasic mind is full of tremendous desires, endless desires, unable to satisfy the desires. So the desires are always creating a lot of hyperactivity, restlessness, and pushing the mind and the body into endless actions. And eventually, endless desires lead to greed, as we've seen earlier. And desires also, as we've seen in chapter 2, have got two directions to go. If you keep on satisfying your desires, it doesn't mean you get happy. You keep on satisfying your desires, your mind keeps on throwing up new desires. So you are stuck in a state of endless activity, which eventually leads to greed and then drives you to shortcuts, to do some wrong actions or what you call illegal actions. The other direction, if so many desires are there, physically it is not possible to satisfy all desires. So therefore, desires that you cannot satisfy cause frustration, anger, disappointment, etc. So that's what the Lord means by saying The fruit of Rajasic desires is dukkham, sorrow, unhappiness, anger, frustration, no peace of mind. And what about a tamasic person? The Lord says, Ajnanam, ignorance, is the hallmark of tamasa phalam, of a tamasic result. A person who has predominant tamasic gunas, ignorance. The person is born in a state of ignorance and he has no desire to learn anything, both materially and spiritually, and totally wastes this human life. Now, the question may arise, is there no hope for a tamasic individual to rise in life? Yes, there is. Because even a tamasic person, in some part of his earlier life, he may have done some good deeds, maybe have done some dhanam or something like that. And that sometimes that good deed fructifies and it results in this tamasic person sometime meeting the right friend who will guide him the right way, or meeting a right guru who will give him a change of direction in life. So even for a tamasic person there is hope, but such a person must act upon it. So now we come into verse number 17. So in verse number 17, the Lord summarizes the final result of a sattvic, rajasic and tamasic person. So the Lord says in verse 17, Sattva, when sattvic guna is the dominant nature in a person, samjayate, from that sattvic guna, samjayate, is born jnanam, is born knowledge. There is a thirst for knowledge, both spiritual and material knowledge. So the jnana indriyas, that means the eyes, ears, nose, etc., all the organs of perception, they become very receptive to listening. So the mind is eager to absorb and retain this knowledge. So the result of sattvic guna is it drives a person towards the path of knowledge. So one of the greatest characteristics to know if we are sattvic, are we constantly attracted to go for spiritual talks? Do we like to listen to, for example, we go to YouTube, do we like to listen for spiritual lectures? So this is a very, what you call, one of the qualities of a sattvic guna person. Okay. What about rajasic? Rajasa lobaha. A rajasic person is always giving in to greed. Lobha is greed. Always hankering, never satisfied with whatever he has. So the desires get out of control eventually, like a raging fire. So if you are somebody who's never satisfied with what you have, despite having everything, like Ravan, I gave the example, he had a wonderful kingdom, ample amount of food to eat, all the luxuries, yet because of one thing he didn't have Sita, it caused his entire destruction. That is Rajasic. What about Tamasic? The Lord says, Tamasa, when Tamasic gunas are dominant in a person, Bhavata eva, verily eva comes into being, there arises in the individual pramada. Pramada means inadvertence, negligence, carelessness in any undertaking. So the person is only interested to rush through and complete the work. Whatever work is allocated, he just wants to quickly rush through. Whether he does it properly or not properly, he is not interested. So he can quickly go back to giving his attention to food and sleep. Second quality of a tamasic person, moha. Moha means delusion. Delusion means conflict in a mind, unable to make a firm decision, always procrastinate, confused. Cha and ajnanam. Ajnanam means ignorance, no inclination to learn anything. So he makes mistakes, doesn't want to learn again how to improve, keeps on making the same mistakes again and again. So Krishna has explained to us the consequence of the three gunas while living. It is also for us, we can analyze our personality and know which guna is predominant in us. And earlier he gave us the consequence when we die in sattvic predominant, rajasic predominant, and tamasic predominant. That brings us to verse number 18 now. Now, in verse number 18, the Lord explains to us the result of these three distinct activities and what will be the direction of travel. So actually verse number 18 is a kind of a summary of the topic. Okay, so it's a summary of the topic. Which direction of travel upon death will an individual go? It summarizes basically verse number 15 and 16. Okay. It summarizes verse number 14 and 15. That is summarized in verse number 18. So the Lord says now in verse number 18, Satvashta. Satvashta means anyone who is engaged in sattvic actions, in virtuous actions, who is humble, who is non-violent, compassionate, okay, who is progressing on the spiritual path, upon death will Gachanti, will go. Where will he go? Urdhvavam, higher. So higher here means the various Swargalokas, and because there are 6 Swargalokas, depending on the competency of each individual, okay, different Swargalokas they will go. And Rajasic people who are engaged in Rajasic actions, indulging continuously in selfish, greedy activities, Tishtanti, they stay or they remain Madhye, means upon death they come back to Manusha Janma. So neither do they go up, neither do they go down. Neither do they become Devas, neither do they become Asuras. They come back to Manusha Janma. And he says, those who are Jaganya Guna Vitrishta, those who are engaged in the lowest of all actions, tamasic people, who are engaged in ignorance, laziness, procrastination, sleep, Gachanti, they go Adaha, they go down to lower births, Asura birth or animal birth, insect birth, etc. Okay, and they have to wait until they exhaust all their papams before some punyam activates and takes them up to a higher life again. So now Krishna has concluded about the nature of the 3 gunas, how they affect our personality, and in which direction of travel one goes for rebirth. Now, in this verse number 19, Krishna will explain how, therefore, an individual can attain liberation. Since it is the gunas that bind the jiva to this body, therefore liberation is learning how to transcend or cut the bondage of the 3 gunas. So it is important to note, that's why many people sometimes question, why do we have so many rituals, prayers, chanting of mantras, so many festivals to observe, Shivratri, Navratri, Krishna Janmashtami, etc. Now let us try to understand this from the perspective of the 3 gunas. A tamasic person is basically lazy, not interested at all in knowledge. If you tell them to go for spiritual talks, they are not interested. So how do you motivate or encourage a tamasic person? Just like how do we motivate a child to follow the spiritual path? We tell them, okay, come to temple, do some seva, engage them in some way, do some dhanam, do something, So a tamasic person slowly, little by little, by engaging in different spiritual activities, can slowly start to get active and also interested in spirituality. So all these different, what we call festivals we have, all the different kinds of what we call activities we have, like seva, like dhanam, etc. All these are to motivate tamasic people to become active. So from tamas you become a bit more rajasic. What about rajasic people? Rajasic people are already active. but they need to be given a direction, a channel where to direct the activities. So again, all this, like what we call, and a rajasic mind, we must remember, the mind is very, what we call, is a monkey mind. It runs about everywhere. So how do we try to, what we call, control this monkey mind? By encouraging rajasic people to chant mantras, say prayers, go and listen to spiritual talks. So little by little, at least they start absorbing and giving this mind a single pointed direction. Rajasic mind runs in every direction. How to bring it into single pointedness? Meditation, prayer, chanting mantras, going for spiritual talks, etc. And even also, like when we observe certain days like Shivratri, we maintain fast. So this helps a person also how to control the mind. So again, all these activities, we have numerous. We should understand the purpose. It's basically to condition the tamasic and rajasic minds. And when the rajasic mind has become more sattvic, then what do we do? Then from that point onwards, jnana yoga or spiritual knowledge becomes the predominant activity of a sattvic person. Because when a rajasic person becomes sattvic, there arises a more deeper thirst for knowledge, and the person progresses on the path of knowledge. Now, therefore, all the three gunas are very important. But of course, if you keep sattvic gunas as predominant, then your rajas will follow sattva. All your actions will be guided by pure thoughts. And tamasic gunas helps us to rest, to relax, to sleep also. But if you're rajasic predominant, you're active for selfish activities, because sattvic gunas are very suppressed. So you'll be active but for selfish purposes. And tamasic gunas, when they are predominant, they are really bad because they keep us in a state of ignorance. And a lot of evil or wrong thoughts come out in us. That's why it is said that the best time to tap your sattvic gunas is a period known as Brahma Muhurt. Brahma Muhurt means the period 1.5 hours before sunrise. Wherever you stay, that period which is 1.5 hours before sunrise, say for example 4:30 to 6, it is the most conducive time for us to wake up, do meditation, read the scriptures, or read anything positive. Okay, so whatever good activities we want to do, get up in the morning and do that in that period, you will get the maximum benefit of your activities. And Rajas is very active from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's when we are going about doing our worldly duties, responsibilities. And that's why Tamas kicks in generally in the night after 8 p.m. So this is where you find all the activities which are done, which are unhealthy activities. And that's why we are advised to go to sleep early before the tamasic gunas kick in and make us think of wrong things. So that is the human nature basically. Now all three gunas are important, but the Lord says all three gunas bind, so we have to learn to transcend the three gunas. A simple analogy I read, a simple way to understand the philosophy of the three gunas and how one should transcend, is the example of the pole vaulter. A pole vaulter, he uses a long pole, so when he runs towards the barrier, he uses the pole so he can climb to a higher position to vault over the hurdle. But once he has crossed the hurdle, what does he do with the pole? He doesn't hang on to it. He has to let go. If he hangs on to the pole, he will not cross over the hurdle. In the same way, a jnani uses the body-mind complex, follows the process of karma yoga, upasana yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga to climb the spiritual ladder, and in the process discards his ego, anger, envy, jealousy, and also finally discards his identification with this body, becomes a gunatit, meaning he transcends the three gunas and claims that I am the consciousness, I am not this body, and then attains moksha. So instead of saying, I am the body which has Atma, the Jnani now says with conviction, I am the Atma which has the temporary body. So the Lord says now in this verse number 19, He says, Yada drashta, Yada, when the drashta, the seer means the realized one, the Jnani, who is not using his two physical eyes, but has the awakened intellect through a long and dedicated study of the scriptures and contemplation, comes to firmly understand the difference between body and consciousness, between Purusha and Prakriti. So what does this awakened seeker realize? Na anupashyanti. He does not see. He does not, with deep spiritual understanding, he does not see kartaram, an agent, anyam, other than gunabheya. Gunabheya means the three gunas. That means the Purusha, when we identify with the consciousness in this body, we understand that it is the gunas which are the agent for our actions. All our thoughts, all our desires are guided by, are conditioned by the three gunas. The consciousness in this body is not responsible for any actions. The consciousness is only a witness to all the actions. So realized soul understands that it is the gunas are nothing else apart from the gunas are the kartaram, the agent or the cause of all actions. Okay, it is the gunas that push the body, the mind into variety of activities. The Jnani identifies himself as the Sakshi Atma, the higher I, the witness consciousness, and is therefore free from any action, free from any karma phalam. The result of actions also do not accrue. Whereas the ignorant one, the Ajnani, identifies himself as the body, says, I am doing everything, and keeps on incurring more punyam and papam. We can also refer to chapter 3, verse 27 to understand this a little bit more. Okay, so refer to chapter 3, verse 27. So the Lord says in this chapter, in this verse number 19, He says, Cha, and Veti, he knows, Gunebhya param. Param means superior to the gunas. Superior or higher than the three gunas is the consciousness in this body. So once the realized soul knows that all actions are caused by the gunas and there is a higher force, the consciousness which is higher than all the three gunas, then what happens? Once this person has become awakened to his real identity that I am the Atma, I am the witness consciousness in this body, I am not this changing perishable body, the Lord says, Saha, such a realized soul, Adhigachati, attains Madbhavam, my nature. There is no physical change in the individual, but an inner change, an inner personality change. What is that change when he says that person identifies with my nature? The Lord's nature is Satchit Ananda, eternal consciousness and bliss. The devotee becomes of the nature of the Lord. So he drops the notion that I'm this body, he identifies with the higher self, and he becomes the very nature of the Lord. So therefore, all the three gunas are important. We must know how to use the three gunas to our advantage and finally realize that I am the Atma, the pure consciousness in this body. That the Lord says is the pathway to liberation. So when we resume in the next lesson, we will carry on from chapter 14, verse number 20. And then finally, there will be a question from Arjuna in verse number 21, asking the Lord how to transcend the three gunas, and the closing verses of chapter 14, the Lord will explain about that. Hari Om Tat Sat.